Welcome to Femme Furious, a podcast where pop culture meets a feminine framing. I am your host, Julia Rose Portela, and today we are getting high at Lobster Fest and hanging out with our besties in Knott's Harbor, Maine, i.e. Our Happy Place by Emily Henry. But before we dive into today's episode, let me tell you how you can follow the pod. You can follow the podcast on Spotify or wherever you get your podcasts. You can watch full video breakdowns on YouTube or on Spotify, and you can follow the pod on Instagram at FemmeFuriousPod. You can also send me an email. We have a You've Got Mailbag coming up at the end of this Emily Henry series, all about Emily Henry, all about this experience. So send in your questions, send in your thoughts, send in your opinions. We will be doing an episode somewhere in July about all of Emily Henry's stuff in our You Got Mailbag. And you can send all of that over to FemmeFuriousPod@gmail.com. All right, let's dive into today's chic peek. We are looking at Happy Place. This is your blanket spoiler warning for this week's episode. If you have not read Happy Place by Emily Henry, you should not be here. But you can go read it, and then you can come back. This episode will be here for you when you're done. Here's a synopsis. Happy Place is about two exes, Harriet and Wynn, who broke up months ago but haven't told any of their friends yet. And now they're stuck playing pretend couple at their annual friendcation in a dreamy cottage in Maine. It's a classic rom-com setup, but it's also very Emily Henry. So you can expect a lot of yearning, a lot of emotional unpacking, and a slow burn tension in between wine nights and lobster rolls. It's fake dating, but elevated, and you can make it a post-breakup era. It's cozy, it's sad, it's sweet, it is certainly messy, but it is like your favorite comfort watch, and I loved this book on a reread, so I'm excited to dive into it. The genre is romance. Judging the cover, the whole crew is in the pool, they are in the lake, they are somewhere in a water setting. It's unclear to me about which part they're in, if they're in a pool, if they're in the water, in the lake. But it is the whole crew kind of in the background jumping into the water, and then it is Wynn and Harriet hanging out in the floaties. Tropes and microtropes. Second chance, found family, fake dating, forced proximity, all the good stuff that we love in a tension-filled romance. Okay, who is who? We have Harriet Kilpatrick. She is a current surgeon, a wannabe Potter. She is a witty woman extraordinaire and a chronic people pleaser. We have Wynn Connor, charming Northwestern boy who is actually handy but slightly insecure. Sabrina, she is the owner of the annual getaway cottage, slightly high-strung, leader of the pack, and a total trauma queen with a T, not a D, not a drama queen, trauma queen. We also have Perth, who is Wynn's friend, but also now Sabrina's current fiance / husband by the end of this book. Cleo is college roommate to Harriet and Sabrina. She is a free spirit, she is a boundary setter, and she owns a farm. And then Kimmy, who is Cleo's girlfriend and the newest to the group. Okay, let's dive into this week's Femme Frame, where we will explore key feminist themes, herstory, cultural context, and more. Okay, let's talk about the heart of this book. And no, I'm not talking about Lobster Fest, and I am not talking about exes pretending to be in love. Not really pretending, but you get the gist. I want to talk about the friendships that we have in womanhood, the transition between girlhood to womanhood. Because underneath the wine-soaked dinners and the group selfies is a much deeper exploration of what it means to be a woman, navigating closeness, conflict, and change amongst your friend group. And I think this is my favorite part of this book. Harriet, Sabrina, and Cleo, the core trio, have been friends since college. And on the surface, they still seem inseparable. But as the story continues to unfold, it is being pulled apart at the seams because we realize that they've been clinging on to this idea of what their friendship was rather than the reality of who they are now and how that relationship amongst them needs to change in order to support where they currently are in their lives. And that hits really hard. This is where Emily Henry does something that's really subtle but incredibly powerful. She peels back the layers of how women are taught to be friends. We are taught to be loyal. We are taught to be supportive. We are taught to never rock the boat. And oftentimes we are taught to put the friendship before our own comfort. And that's exactly what the trio does throughout this book. instead of just confessing that her and Win broke up and navigating how uncomfortable and difficult that conversation will be with her friends, she would rather endure pretending, even though it's literally eating her alive, it's causing her a ton of emotional distress, to promote the enjoyment of her best friend's wedding. Instead of Sabrina telling Harriet that she knows about the breakup and share that she is fearing abandonment and the dissolution of the friend group more openly, she continues to put Win and Harriet together and make them uncomfortable, hoping that it will be a band-aid fix instead of just having a conversation that is difficult and challenging with her friends. And instead of Cleo saying that she's pregnant, which, okay, is fine because it's different in this scenario, there is a pecking order to how that news comes out, and it's okay that she doesn't need to be like cornered into telling her friends that she's pregnant, when she does by the end of this book. But she continues to deflect Sabrina's attempts because she doesn't want to hurt her feelings. And everyone has a rhyme or reason to why they do what they do throughout the course of this book, but it is poking holes in the idea of what female friendship should be, and then our characters, core trio, getting to the end of this book and being like, oh, the boat is sinking. There's something deeper going on here. It's a dynamic rooted in emotional labor, which a lot of feminist theorists like Arlie Hochschild have written about for decades. Women are conditioned to be the emotional glue, managing not just their own feelings, but everyone else's too. And we see that play out in the book, not just in the romantic context, but also amongst the platonic friendships of the group. And Harriet in particular is practically an expert at keeping the peace. She takes on the role as mediator in the group, even when it means that she is lying to her best friends and she is lying to herself. So what is it that we are learning here, or unlearning here? We are unlearning the idea that closeness equals perfection, or that closeness equals intimacy, really. That good friendship is without friction. That we owe our younger selves loyalty to dynamics that no longer fit. In reality, a real friendship, like any relationship that we have, requires honesty and evolution and room and space for each individual in that dynamic to grow. And that includes letting go of roles that we have outgrown, even if they once felt sacred to us. This is true for our core trio, who starts as a trio, and over time, as they add people into this group, as they become a larger friend group, as they fall in love, as they build new lives, as they go into their careers, that relationship remains central, but it's not the same as when you're in college living with the people and you're there all the time and you're super interconnected. There needs to be room for evolution of the dynamic, because the dynamic was always going to change. The dynamic was never going to be us as three roommates for the rest of our lives, right? Hopefully not. And, or maybe so, if that's like for some people. But this idea that it was always going to have to evolve. Historically, female friendship has often been sidelined in pop culture. It's either that we witness it as like a comedic BFF, sidekick type of deal, or a toxic frenemy, or the group chat that just like magically solves everything with a bottle of rosé. But what Happy Place really offers is something that is much more tender and more realistic. It's more true. It is friendship as a space of identity. It is friendship as a part of our personal and collective history. And it is friendship as a space of community. But also, throughout the course of this book, it is something that, like any long-term commitment, can start to feel like a script that we didn't write, but that we keep performing anyway. And this is what Harriet in particular is doing throughout the entirety of this book. Cleo also represents a moment when someone in the group actually says, you know what, things are changing and I'm changing and this doesn't feel right anymore. I want something else. I want something different. And suddenly that one conversation, that one comment that she makes shakes the whole foundation of their friendship, and it's the turning point of the book, instead of the turning point of the book actually being about Harriet and Win. This book does such an incredible job of showing this idea of feminism as courage to evolve, even if you know it is going to disappoint other people. Because I think this is a huge part of the reclamation that we have individually that we all have to take. We all have to break out of the role that we have been performing, and we have to be okay setting boundaries and growing out of what society or our family or whatever has taught us to be, and deciding who we actually want to be, even if it disappoints people, and knowing, in fact, it probably is going to disappoint some people. And Cleo is not afraid to rock the boat, even though she tries for the entirety of the book to not do that. She continues to get pushed to her boundary's edge. She continues to hold the boundary, and it is when they are getting the tattoo. First of all, she can't because she's pregnant, which is what is really going on there, but to be consistently pushed to the limit of her boundaries and then having to hold them and maintain them, and this being a breaking point in their friendship and in the dynamic in that moment, is so realistic and so true to the nature of evolving out of a childhood friendship, or even the friends that you've had in your 20s or in college, and how those relationships have potential to grow over time, but that they are not guaranteed or promised to grow and evolve over time. So yeah, Happy Place is about love and heartbreak and fake dating your ex-fiance, but the real breakup, the one that guts you a little bit, the real fight, the one that really hits home, is this slow realization that your friendship isn't just about showing up to a cottage or a vacation every year. It is about showing up as who you actually are authentically in that moment, and trusting that these people that you have a foundation and love and care with will support you and hold you through the season that you're in. And if that's not feminist, I don't know what is. All right, babes, you ready for a quickie? Let's jump into the key themes from this book. Now, this book, more than I think some of the other books in Emily Henry's series, has a very clear theme, and it is about people pleasing and perfectionism. I love to talk about quotes when I do these quickies or when I do a slay by slay, and honestly, I can't even read all of the quotes. I have 2 pages on my Goodreads of notes, and every single one of them pertains to this idea of people pleasing. The other thing I want to talk about a little bit later is perception, because I think perception is an interesting concept that is discussed or danced around in this book. But let's start with people pleasing and perfectionism. Harriet spends most of the book contorting herself into a version of herself that she thinks everyone else needs. She tries to be quiet and agreeable and always fine. And this starts at the very beginning of the book when she says that she's at home with her family of origin, and she's talking about the dynamic, and she goes, "The shouting always gave way to an even deeper silence after, and so I did my best to head the shouting off at the pass, because I hated the silence, felt every second of it as a kind of dread." So this is early on that she is discussing this pattern that is a huge part of who she is. She has been conditioned and primed to be this way based off of her family dynamics. That is not the first time this theme or idea will come up. This is a role that she was taught in her family, and it's consistently reaffirmed to her with dinners like the one that she brings Wynn to later on in the book, where her family says, "You know, we never had to worry about Harriet. Never even had a rebellious phase. Never even got detention," Mom says. "Had perfect grades, got plenty of scholarships. No matter how stressful anything else was, we always knew Harriet was fine." In that same scene, she brings Wynn up to her bedroom and she's showing him old family photos. And as they are progressing through the picture book, she says, "My sister grows more and more standoffish, while I, in the meanwhile, smile like my life depends on how visible my teeth are." This idea of just putting on a show, I'm fine, things are fine, everything's fine, even though that's not necessarily how she feels. She even goes so far as to admit to him, "I used to make these bargains with the universe, like if I got straight A's, then everything would be okay. Or if I won the science fair a second time, or if I was never late to school, or if I always did the dishes before Mom got home from work, or I got her the perfect birthday gift, or whatever. And I know my parents love me. I've always known that. But the truth is, I've spent my whole life trying to make it up to them." So it's no shock that when they lose Hank, which is Wynn's father, that Harriet completely crashes out about Wynn and his grief. She doesn't know how to process it. Her family is just consistently repressing what is happening in their emotional landscape. And so even though Harriet and Wynn are already planning their wedding at this point, even though they have an entire life together, Harriet still feels that she needs to earn Wynn's love in the face of his grief, and in general, not just even in the face of his grief, but the grief and the situation with Hank certainly brings it up. So in the midst of this entire grief spiral that they are having together, she prays. She's praying to God, the universe, whoever is listening, please help him stop hurting so much, him being Wynn. I'll make bargains with the universe. If I make the apartment cozier, if I don't complain about work, if I make the most of the constant rain, if I need nothing from him, he'll be okay. And then she says, later on, as her and Wynn are breaking down what actually happened between the two of them, she says, I break into sobs as the reality hits me that all of the time and energy I'd spent trying to be fine for him, to not crack under the weight of my job, to not need anything from him he couldn't give, all it had done was drive him away from me faster. So this isn't just a personality quirk, it's her survival mode. And it is what she is doing to present as somebody who can be likable in the face of her own insecurities. And it's something that a lot of women are taught to master. Quite honestly, it taps into a cultural script that says that women should be easy, they should be chill, they should be grateful, and they should always be accommodating, even when it's killing them inside. You cannot be your fullest self if you are busy being everyone else's favorite version of you, and this is what Harriet struggles with the most. She doesn't even know what she likes, and the things that she does like, she discovers by accident by going off script, like pottery. And that's why, despite my wanting to gag at the very hallmark nature of it all, her journey with pottery and eventually with giving up her job at the hospital and moving to Montana with Wynn is revolutionary because she is finally putting aside everyone else's needs, including Wynn's, and considering what will actually make her feel fulfilled. I also want to look at this idea of perspective, which happens a couple different times throughout the book where two characters are looking at the same thing and have a completely different recollection or understanding of what is actually happening. And the main one is obviously Harriet and Wynn, where they are looking at their breakup that happened over the phone, and they are looking at this time afterwards, and they are looking at their experience in the cabin together, the cottage together, as completely different experiences, because as soon as Hank passes away, and they are both in a state of grief, Harriet is doing everything that she can to be the good girl. She is trying to not complain. She's trying to cope with her guilt that she has pulled Wynn away from his family, from a job that he likes, from his friends, all that kind of stuff. She's coping with her shame that she doesn't necessarily even like what she's doing, that she's taken Wynn away from all of this other stuff for something that she doesn't even necessarily love or enjoy. And then on top of it, knowing that he's grieving and not wanting to put him put any pressure on him at all. And the way that Wynn perceives this is like, you don't want to go wedding venue, you don't want to do any cake tastings, you don't ever complain, but there's nothing here that seems to be lighting you up about our relationship anymore. And for Wynn, who is so insecure about his sense of accomplishment and what he's doing in this world, they both have the sense of shame. She is ashamed that she pulled him away from people that he loves and cares about, and he's ashamed that he's got this job and it's not really what he said it is. And when Wynn decides to go back to Montana, and him and Harriet are long distance for a period of time, every single time that he misses a FaceTime or misses a call or something happens, Harriet's like, no big deal, no big deal, no big deal. But on her end, she's breaking down that her partner and the person that she loves and that she wants to comfort and wants comfort from isn't there, and she doesn't know what to do about it, and she doesn't know how to help him. And the fact that she needs comfort herself because she's in a position where she doesn't like what she's doing, and she just needs somebody to say, you can choose another path, you can do something different if this doesn't make you happy. And she doesn't have that with Wynn. So she's consistently giving off this vibe to him that she's aloof, or that she is disinterested, or pulling out of this relationship, when what she's trying to do is say, I love you so much, I don't want to add another single thing to your plate. And so I know a lot of people will approach this book and say, oh, it's a miscommunication trope, but I really don't think it is. I think it is this idea of perception and this way that our trauma and our preconceived belief systems influence the way that we take in information about the conversation. It is affirming something to both of these people based off of their pre-established belief systems. And same thing later on for the friend group. All three of the girls in the friend group are having a completely different perception of what is happening in the friend group. So Harriet is going into this weekend like, these are my friends. I've been doing my own thing, so they're all close, and this is something that we get to have, and I'm not going to do anything to ruin it because I'm already ruining it by going off and living my own life and doing my own thing, and I've ruined it even more, and they don't even know it because Wynn and I have broken up, so we've broken up this group. She's got this perception going into it. Sabrina's got this idea of, I have a friend who doesn't want to see me in Cleo, cancels plans, won't give me a date, won't give me a clear answer, and I've got another friend who went through a major life moment, breakup or dissolution of their engagement, and didn't tell me, and then Cleo is like, I'm pregnant, I'm starting a family, I'm nervous about it, and because it's early on, and this is a normal thing that people do, like, I haven't said anything to anyone yet, I'm freaking out, and I'm working different hours, and my life is changing, and things are changing around us, and going into this, just trying to delicately balance their friendship and their perception of their friendship and what it means to them versus, again, I know I talked about this already, but like what it evolves into, and this idea of those choices come from their preconceived familial lives, where Cleo grows up in a very boundary-based family, where she grows up in a family who has a lot of love and a lot of respect and lets you choose your own path, and it's very free and loving. And then Harriet, whose family gets along fine, but she recognizes my parents aren't in love. They stayed together because they felt like maybe it was the right thing to do. They like each other fine enough, but they both settled and compromised because they got pregnant accidentally. And then you have Sabrina, whose mom dies, and then after that, her dad just remarries and remarries and remarries, just like continues to bop around from relationship to relationship. And the poignancy of those preconceived traumas or those preconceived settings in which the person coming into the relationship is cooked, and how that influences what happens in the dynamic and the roles that they all play within the scope of their friendship. So this idea of our belief systems and nature versus nurture are things that I think the book explores and does really well, and does it in a way that is not so on the nose but feels really clear that that's what's happening. And this, more than any other of the Emily Henry books, has such a touch of realism. And I know for a lot of people this is not their favorite or it's not on the top of the list, but there's something about this book that feels like this concept of like touch grass. This book has a firm grip in reality and how relationships are actually navigated and how friendships are navigated and how they are dealt with and how complex situations influence the dynamicism within the scope of a relationship. And I just love this book. I loved it the first time around, and there is a sense of sadness or a feeling of ennui when you're reading it, but there is also something very tender about it, and I appreciate that so much in this book, more than I think some of her other books. All right, there's one Easter egg that I want to bring up before we end today's little soiree, and it is, once again, following January and Gus through their journey in everyone else's books in this universe. They are at Murder, She Read, and this is the quote. I picked this because the Wall Street Journal gave it such a cranky review I needed to read it myself. It's by this married couple who usually publish separately. One of them writes literary doorstop novels, and the other writes romance. What? Kimmy snatches the book. I know them. Seriously, Parth asked. I went to college with them in Michigan, she says. They weren't together yet, though. Her books are really horny. Is this one horny? So, a little bit of January and Gus. Apparently they wrote a book together, and I would really love to see it. It's giving Alice and Hayden. Like, I'm more interested in the book that Alice and Hayden wrote together than I am about their relationship, although I am very invested in January and Gus. So, but I would read this book. I would read whatever they wrote together. All right, let's crack open the Burn book, where we will look at our superlatives for this week. The bold and Bothered Award. This is when the trio breaks down and starts fighting over the tattoo, and Cleo says, I meant what I said, that she can't just decide how things should be between all of us and then bulldoze all of us to get her way. The Shiro Award. When Harriet calls her parents at the Denver airport and tells them that she withdrew from her residency. And as her parents are crashing out, her father ends up saying, why are you wasting your time with pottery? And Harriet says, because it makes me happy, and I don't consider anything that does that a waste of time. The Femme Fatale Award. Shortly thereafter, when Harriet's sister Eloise messages her and ends up confessing that she resents her a little bit because she didn't realize how much pressure she was under. And Eloise ends up saying to her, you were just a kid. Neither of us had much say over our lives, but now we do. You're doing what's right for you. That's all you can do. Speak your truth, trophy. Of course, the line of the book, in every universe, it's you for me. Honorary heartthrob. When they are on the Ferris wheel and a very high wind says, the lights taste like the fabric of her sundress, Harriet's sundress. Soft, delicate, and so fucking light it dissolves on your tongue. And he does all of this while slowly dragging his fingers up her thigh, on her bare skin, over his knee. I love this moment. This is one of those things that I remembered very prominently about the book before going back into it. I remember the wine cellar scene, and I remembered this scene here on the Ferris wheel. Oh, wind, probably not on the top of my list, but this moment in particular was a 12 out of 10 for me. All right, thank you for listening to this week's episode of Femme and Furious. If you like this episode, share it out with your friends. I will be back on Friday, the 4th of July, with the Dames of Democracy episode. And then I will be back next Tuesday with Book Lovers. And until then, I'm happy you're with me in this universe.